My name is Ethan, and until that night I thought I truly understood the people in my life. My wife Sophia and my boss, Mr. Harrison Whitlock. Harrison was the kind of man people described with words like distinguished, charismatic, and influential. I always just thought of him as my boss. Demanding, sharp, predictable. But one dinner proved I didn't know him at all. Sophia and I had been married for 7 years. She's warm, witty, and has the kind of gentle beauty that makes strangers smile at her in passing. I always loved how she could make even the most stressful days feel manageable just by being herself. Harrison had heard me talk about her for years but had never met her. So when he invited us both to a private dinner, just a casual evening to celebrate the team's recent success, as he phrased it, I didn't think much of it. I was actually proud to introduce my wife to the man who practically ran the company. The restaurant was one of those places where the lighting is soft, the servers move silently, and the tables are spaced far enough apart that no one overhears private conversations. Harrison arrived first, already seated, a glass of something aged and expensive swirling in his hand. I remember noticing how sharply he turned when he saw us approaching, how his eyes landed on Sophia before they even reached me. He stood, smiling politely, but his gaze lingered on her just a little too long. "Sophia," he said, taking her hand in both of his. "I've heard so much about you. Ethan undersold you, I'm afraid." Sophia laughed awkwardly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, I hope he didn't say anything too embarrassing." Harrison chuckled, but it wasn't in response to her joke. It sounded as if he was privately amused by something only he understood. We sat down, Sophia across from me, Harrison beside me, but he angled his chair slightly toward her, subtly, as if the entire evening was a two-person conversation he intended to dominate. I noticed it, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe it was nothing. But the nothing kept piling up. Every time Sophia spoke, he leaned in a little too closely. Every time she smiled, he watched her lips instead of her eyes. Whenever I said something, his response was quick, clipped, and followed immediately by his attention sliding right back to her. Still, I tried to stay relaxed. We needed this dinner. Harrison controlled the big promotions, the big raises, the big opportunities. Impressing him mattered, maybe too much. Halfway through the evening, the waiter brought out a bottle of wine. Harrison gestured for Sophia to take the first sip. She lifted the glass, tasting it with that delicate, thoughtful expression she always had when trying something new. Harrison watched her intensely enough that I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. When she set the glass down, he smiled softly and said, almost under his breath, "Exquisite." I wasn't sure whether he meant the wine. The conversation drifted, work, travel, pointless small talk, but the energy across the table felt wrong. Sophia seemed cheerful but unaware. Harrison seemed calculated, focused, as though he was studying her, memorizing her reactions, filing away details for reasons I couldn't yet understand. Dessert menus came and went. The plates were cleared, the night wound down, and for a moment I thought it was almost over. Then Harrison leaned forward. He didn't look at me. He looked only at Sophia, their eyes locked in an unsettling, uninterrupted gaze that lasted far too long to be innocent. Then in a low voice only she should have been able to hear, but I was close enough to catch it, the words came out slowly, deliberately, as if he wanted each one to sink into her skin. "Sophia, does he treat you as wonderfully as you deserve?" My stomach tightened instantly. Her smile faded. She seemed startled, unsure how to respond. My hands went cold. Something electric and wrong filled the air around us. Before I could say anything, before she could, Harrison leaned even closer. His voice barely above a whisper but clear enough to chill me to the bone. "Because if he doesn't, I will." The table fell silent. Sophia looked at him in disbelief, and I felt something inside me shift. Something sharp, something angry. Something I wasn't sure I could ever put back where it belonged. Time seemed to stretch. The restaurant's soft background hum became deafening in my ears. I stared at Harrison, trying to process the words, trying to breathe without sounding frantic. Sophia's hand trembled slightly on the table, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. I forced myself to speak, keeping my voice calm and measured. "Excuse me, what exactly did you just say?" Harrison didn't flinch. He didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't backtrack. Instead, he leaned back slightly, that same unsettling calm in his gaze. I merely wanted to ensure that my friend's wife is treated with the respect she deserves, he said smoothly. It would be a shame if someone overlooked her worth. Overlooked her worth. His words were polite, almost elegant, but underneath there was a razor-sharp edge. I felt it cut straight through the air between us. My jaw tightened, my mind raced, but I kept my composure. I had to. Sophia looked down, fidgeting with her napkin. I could see the confusion in her eyes. Was she flattered? Shocked? Afraid? Maybe all three. I reached for her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. It's okay, I whispered. She nodded, grateful for the silent anchor I provided. Harrison continued as if nothing had happened, his tone friendly, but the underlying implication hung like smoke in the room. Ethan, you're fortunate to have someone like Sophia. Truly rare to find someone who balances kindness, humor, and intelligence so effortlessly. She's remarkable. I swallowed hard. I wanted to respond with anger to assert control, but I knew it would escalate everything, and I didn't want the restaurant to witness it. So I let him finish. Dinner ended shortly after. We stepped outside into the crisp night air. Sophia walked beside me, quieter than usual, lost in thought. Harrison followed a step behind, offering polite small talk, but I barely heard him. My mind was racing with scenarios, questions, and a surge of adrenaline that refused to fade. Back in the car, I finally let myself exhale. What was that about? I asked, unable to keep the tension out of my voice. Sophia shook her head. I don't know, Ethan. I think he meant something about how he values people, but the way he said it, it felt like a threat. Or maybe a challenge. A threat. A challenge. My stomach churned. I had always trusted people, especially those in positions of power. But Harrison was different, calculating, dangerous in a subtle, polished way. My protective instincts flared. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. Every glance toward Harrison made my chest tighten. I replayed the dinner over and over, analyzing every word, every look. My professional judgment told me he hadn't crossed a physical line. But emotionally, the impact was undeniable. The insinuation that if I failed to appreciate Sophia, he might step in. It echoed in my head for days. I spent the following week watching him carefully, noting his subtle interactions with colleagues, the way he observed people, the tiny smirks, the brief touches of flattery that seemed to disarm everyone. He was meticulous. He clearly knew how to manipulate a room without anyone realizing it. But I wasn't about to let him manipulate my marriage. Not ever. I began to notice Sophia was quieter than usual around me too. She didn't mention the dinner. Didn't recount the whisper. But I could tell something lingered. That night, over a late cup of tea, I finally spoke. Sophia, I know something happened at that dinner. You don't have to tell me everything, but I need to know. Are you okay? She looked up at me, eyes glistening slightly. I'm confused, Ethan. I've never experienced anything like that. I felt noticed in a way I shouldn't have. And now I feel unsettled. Unsettled. The word hit me like a punch. It wasn't just Harrison's words. It was the implication, the power dynamic, the sudden threat he wielded. I felt the protective surge again, but this time it was sharper. Focused. I made a decision in that moment. If anyone, no matter how powerful, was going to threaten the balance of my life, my marriage, my peace, my family, they would have to go through me first. I wasn't the kind of man who stood by quietly while someone tried to unsettle the people I loved. Over the following weeks, I watched carefully, but I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I built subtle defenses. Stronger boundaries at work, protecting private conversations with Sophia, reinforcing our trust. Every interaction became a test of character, a silent contest of control. And through it all, Sophia and I talked openly, honestly. We didn't let fear or confusion fester. The truth slowly became clear. Harrison had always been observant, always testing boundaries. But the difference between him and me was how we responded. He thrived on tension, subtle dominance, and manipulation. I thrived on clarity, trust, and loyalty. One evening, about a month after that dinner, Harrison attempted another subtle intrusion, an offhand remark about Sophia's charm during a meeting. I calmly interrupted, redirected the conversation, and made it unmistakably clear that our personal lives were off-limits. He smiled, slightly surprised, and backed off. Later, Sophia and I sat in silence, hands entwined. I whispered, No one, sophomore. No one will ever come between us. Not him. Not anyone. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. The threat hadn't disappeared, but our bond had grown stronger. I realized then that sometimes the danger isn't in the people themselves. It's in allowing their power to infiltrate your life. And I wasn't going to allow that. We had dinner that night at home, laughing, talking, fully present. Harrison's whisper still lingered in my memory, sharp and unsettling. But it no longer had the power to fracture us. Because I had learned the truth. The strongest defense isn't control over others. It's the unwavering strength of your own integrity, and the loyalty and love that stand behind it.